Hi, and welcome to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
We're right in the middle of June. Today is June 15th, and we're on page 42 in your magazines. And today we're going to hear part one of an article about an author who was originally a sports writer, but then enjoyed huge success writing popular books.
I think our author today, Mitch Albom, has had an interesting life in that he initially wanted to be a musician. He tried his hand at it. He failed. He tried something different, found success, and said, let's try some other things, and found even more success. And I think Mitch Albom, our author today, is a really good example of it's okay if your original passion doesn't work out. Follow what you're good at. Sometimes you will find phenomenal success, and then in that other field, it opens avenues for you to do whatever else you want.
You know what? I just remembered a little piece of rather negative gossip. Maybe I should save that to the end.
I want to know now. You built that way up.
You're going to have to listen to the end of day 2. Okay, stay tuned. Let's just find out. We should find out the positive things first, because otherwise it's going to completely color our impressions.
Yeah, that's a good point. Oh.
You look so irritated.
I want to know right now. That is some juicy lead up there.
Okay, here's our title, The Beauty of Life in For One More Day. Now, this is in italics, so it is the name of a book. That's not the only reason that we will use italics, but we already know it's about Mitch Albom, the author, so we know that in this case it's referring to a book he wrote. So The Beauty of Life in For One More Day, I think that's pretty straightforward and easy to understand. Do you want to start?
Sure. In life, we all lose people who are near and dear to our hearts. Quite often, they depart unexpectedly, depriving us of the opportunity to say our goodbyes. Mitch Albom's novel, For One More Day, is a tale about a person who is given a chance to spend one final day with a loved one who has passed away.
The book's main character is a professional baseball player named Charles Chick Bonetto. After Chick retired from the sport, his life takes a turn for the worse. He has trouble finding meaningful work and loses touch with his family. After sinking into a deep depression, Chick decides to commit suicide by jumping off of a water tower. However, something unusual happens when he takes the plunge. Instead of dying, he awakens on a baseball field. On the field, he spots his mother, who died a decade before. When she asks Chick to spend one more day with her, he agrees and decides to make the most of this opportunity to get to know her better.
Chick's father left home when he was in the 5th grade, and he initially blamed his mother. Yet, as they run errands together on this special day, Chick sees his mother from a new perspective. He discovers his father left them because he was having an affair with another woman. Chick comes to appreciate the many sacrifices that his mother made for him. He also begins to forgive himself for all of the mistakes he's made in his own life. At the end of the day, Chick becomes conscious again and manages to survive his suicide attempt. Even though Chick dies of a stroke 5 years after this incident, he uses his final years to coach children's sports and reconnect with his family.
Okay, this is an interesting story. We're only halfway through our article. We'll hear part 2 tomorrow. But I guess we can discuss it a little later. But very often people who come very, very close to death or who have actually crossed over into death but then come back, they often come back to life with a completely changed view of the world and their life. They often end up really valuing life.
I read an article that was talking to people that died on an operating table. Their heart stopped. They had to be resuscitated. That means brought back to life, maybe using CPR. And reading their stories is at once a little scary, a little wonderful, and really interesting. I don't know if you can find any of these articles translated, but quite honestly, most of what these people say is really simple and basic. And if you're interested, you can find one of these articles about people who were revived and take a look. It's interesting to what happens to your body and your consciousness after your heart stops.
And the stories are all very similar. They go towards a light, and the light accepts them. They feel like they are loved and forgiven for everything. And then often the light will say, it's not your time yet, hurry and go back. And then they go back.
A lot of the calmness. I remember that was an adjective, calm. You just felt calm.
Because when we think back on our past, it's very easy to remember our mistakes, things that embarrassed us, things we would have done differently. But these people all say when they go over their life after death, they had no shame. It was just, that's what happened.
That sounds pretty sweet right now.
Yeah. For all of us, let's go back to the beginning. Okay, our first paragraph.
In life, we all lose people who are near and dear to our hearts.
Now, before the program, Chris asked me if I had any particular experience of losing people close to me due to illness or whatever. And I said, yes. I go, doesn't everybody have this experience? If you haven't had it yet, maybe you're just too young. It's going to happen to everybody.
Yeah, near and dear to our hearts is a very nice phrase. You'll quite see this in a lot of writing, especially when we're talking about our loved ones, which is also another very common phrase for family and friends.
Right. And for me, it was my father-in-law because I was there for much of the process. My own father, my mother, I wasn't there. They were back in the States. But when we talk about people near and dear to our hearts, the first people I think of are parents.
Quite often, they depart unexpectedly, depriving us of the opportunity to say our goodbyes.
If someone has died of an accident or of a sudden heart attack, it's usually much harder to get used to the idea that they are gone. If they have been sick for a long time, they suffer a lot, which is no good. But at least it gives us time to prepare. When it's sudden, it's just much harder. I'm still in shock over the death of a neighbor across the street who just died recently of a heart attack.
You know, this actually, mentioning it, is how my father passed away, that he was sick for a very long time and he would not go to the doctor. It was very clear he was sick. But he died very quickly in a motorcycle accident.
Good Lord.
And so in some ways, like we knew our father was very sick and something was happening. We didn't know what, and he refused to go to the doctor, but then he just died in a motorcycle accident. And it's one of those things where at least he died doing what he loved. My dad really loved riding his motorcycle. It's not like in Taiwan where almost everybody has a motorcycle. My dad had his Harley motorcycle, and he loved doing it.
Yeah.
So, you know, I didn't get a chance to say goodbye, but I knew my dad was probably having a great time because of the time of year he was riding his bike and, you know.
Can you share what illness he had?
I don't know.
You don't know?
He would not go to the doctor. My dad worked in a hospital, and he was an anesthesiologist. This is the person that gives you medicine.
So he knew better.
Well, I think that's exactly why he didn't go. He was afraid to find out because he knew about the treatments. He knew about the pain. I suspect my dad knew it was bad, and he just decided to say, well, if I don't find out, then out of sight, out of mind.
Live life the way I normally would. So it was very possibly cancer.
I suspect, yeah.
Because very often with cancer, you will get extreme treatments, either radiation or chemotherapy, and they cause great suffering. In some cases, it might be better if you do not treat and you just improve your quality of life before you die.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on.
Mitch Albom's novel, For One More Day, is a tale about a person who is given a chance to spend one final day with a loved one who has passed away.
We don't know yet who that loved one is and what the circumstances were behind the death of that loved one. We'll find that out in paragraph 2. The book's main character is a professional baseball player named Charles Chick Bonetto. Now, when we see Bonetto, we know pretty well that he has Italian background if he's not Italian himself. And so a professional baseball player, that's his career. That's what he does for a living. After Chick retired from the sport, his life takes a turn for the worse. So when they say from the sport, they mean, of course, baseball. They didn't want to say after he retired from baseball because it sounds like you're repeating yourself too much. So they use the sport instead. It's like a pronoun here. It's not a real noun. So after he retired from the sport, we don't stress the sport. His life takes a turn for the worse. Now, this is not a good thing to happen. But for something to take a turn for the worse, that means suddenly things are not going well anymore. They're going poorly.
So our author today, Mitch Albom, and as I said at the top of the show, he wanted to be a musician, but he found a lot of success as a sports writer. And I think that, like a lot of the stories that we've talked about over the months, that these people draw upon their own lives. And sure enough, I'm sure thinking Mitch Albom probably knew a character like this that did a great job in baseball, was a pro sports ball player, and then retired, and things kind of go bad, because that's a fairly common story for guys to go bankrupt, 10, 15 years after they retire, making millions of dollars because of mismanagement or not preparing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he had someone in mind, or at least several people in mind, that he drew upon to make this story.
You make a really good point with that, because a lot of the celebrities that we envy now because they're rich and famous and glamorous, they often had a very simple background. And when they suddenly become wealthy and well-known, they often have no idea how to handle their money. A lot of people will cheat them out of a lot of money. They'll buy a lot of crazy things they don't need, like a yacht or something. And then the day comes that you've used up your money and you're retiring.
Yeah.
So it may have been something like that.
Yeah. In fact, my football team that I adore, my Buffalo Bills, some of our legendary players from when I was like 10, 11 years old, now they're in their late 50s, they're in their 60s, and they played a hard physical sport. And they no longer have money to pay for their treatment. And they have like GoFundMe, which is you can pay money online to pay for your legend's knee surgery or back surgery or to help them with rehabilitation. And those are sad stories.
Whereas they had millions of dollars
Millions
before.
of dollars, right.
People need to plan. And also another thing is if you're in any kind of sports, you often will have head injuries, which means you may have brain damage, especially in football. Yeah. Next sentence, he has trouble finding meaningful work and loses touch with his family. Oh, that's the thing about professional sports. You're in your prime up to maybe age 36.
Yeah, the NFL, that's the American Football League. NFL means National Football League, but people say it really stands for not for long. It's not something you do for many years.
Because after that, you're getting old. Your body is not as strong or as agile. You can't react as quickly. You often have a lot of injuries from sports. So you retire, and what do you do next? You're just going to sit around at home? Even if you have enough money, if you have no really big purpose in life, you can easily become depressed. And if you become depressed, what happens next? Often it's alcohol, it's drugs, and your family falls apart.
And that's kind of what happens in our story here. That's a great synopsis, actually.
That's right. So after sinking into a deep depression, Chick decides to commit suicide by jumping off a water tower.
I hate to be this guy, but I kind of laughed when I heard about how this is how he wanted to kill himself. I was like, wow, this is how you want to go? Like, you're going to jump off the water tower?
Yeah. Because why do you think it's weird?
That is a gruesome way to go. I mean, you're jumping
on the ground.
Yeah, it's really high. A water tower.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of the water towers where I'm from. Those are really big buildings. You're going to jump off that?
This is a really downer kind of note, but one of the buildings that I went by every day at Taiwan University was one from which one of the students jumped off. It's a new building. It's only been there a few years. And I thought, oh, that's a nice, fancy, shiny new building. But now every time I walk by it, 'cause I even walked around the building to see if any trace was left. It was the next day. There was no trace left at all. They totally cleaned it up. But, you really are affecting other people just by knowing that's how you died.
Yeah. And I'm not laughing because it's like, ha-ha, funny, but I'm laughing because it's like uncomfortable. And how do you deal with that emotion? And it's a little bit of gallows humor, which is when you laugh at something very dark about death, because how do you accept that emotion? So some people, and I'm one of them, you just kind of have to laugh and try to like run from that thought in your head.
Because you don't know what else to do to react.
How else do you do with this?
That's right. Gallows is Gallows. Gallows. That's a framework usually made of wood. You hang a rope from it. That's what they use to hang people who are going to be hanged to death. Okay, next sentence. However, something unusual happens when he takes the plunge. So he's jumped off this very high place, and we expect him to splat on the ground. Splat. It's an awful word. This is an onomatopoeic word. That means it's actually a sound that something makes when it hits the ground and it splatters. So splat. Before he hits the ground, something unusual happens, something unexpected happens.
Now, a plunge is a dive or a jump that you do very quickly and energetically. If your toilet has a problem, you will use a plunger. So the word plunge here is quite special.
Okay. Instead of dying, he awakens on a baseball field. All right, now it sounds like we have entered the world of the supernatural because he actually has to hit the ground and just die in a terrible way. But he's awakening now. He's waking up from the suicide attempt, and he's on a baseball field, so it must be in the world of imagination or a dream or something. On the field, he spots his mother, who died a decade before. Now, this also makes us feel that they have taken us into the world of people who have already died, and that's something that Chris says he doesn't get into.
Yeah, personally, this is not something that I have a lot of feelings for. After I die, if you guys send me to the moon and blow me up in fireworks or you throw my body in the ocean, I don't care.
The end is the end.
It's more for like the emotional impact of my family after. Mm-hmm. But in terms of what I personally feel you do with me, I don't know. Just chop me up and feed me to my cats. I don't care.
Some people believe in an afterlife.
Yeah.
Many people do not. Chris is one who does not. Okay, so he sees his mother, but she died 10 years ago, a decade before. When she asks Chick to spend one more day with her, he agrees and decides to make the most of this opportunity to get to know her better. Now, why he was so willing to do this is explained in the next paragraph. So he meets his mother, and he is given the chance to spend one more day with her. So whatever he didn't do before she died before, he's going to try and make up for it now.
Yeah. I'm not a sentimental person about my own death, but I am sentimental about the deaths of others, and I see the appeal of this story. I definitely would get choked up if I had more time to spend with my dad or my mom. When we make the most of something, we enjoy something as much as possible.
Actually, 20 years before my father passed away, he had a health problem. It was suddenly at that point I realized someday I'm going to lose my father.
Yeah.
So for 20 years, I tried to say everything that I had to say to my father to make sure that I didn't have any regrets. Every time I flew back to the States to visit him, I would just tell him everything I wanted to say, spend time with him. And so finally when he went, I was at peace. That 20-year period, at the beginning, I was suffering because I was thinking, I forgot that he's going to die someday. So having prepared myself for 20 years, it was okay when he died.
That's a great way of dealing with it. I don't like the idea of people digging in their heels and not speaking because of this thing that happened a million years ago. Who cares? Let's move on.
You're going to regret it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, last paragraph.
Final paragraph. Chick's father left home when he was in the 5th grade, and he initially blamed his mother.
All right, kids don't know what's going on with their parents often. They've got a lot of things going on between them. And so the father left the family. How often do you read about somebody's biography and somebody left the family? It's not always the father. Sometimes it's the mother, but often it's the father. So many people come from broken families. And so Chick, at that time, he was in the 5th grade, he kind of thought it was his mother's fault.
And this is an interesting fact that I actually learned through a number of psychologists that talk about these issues. That when a parent, a father, whoever abandons the family, that person is often idealized.
Yeah, because they don't see him.
That's right. And only if my dad was here, then we could play ball together or we can do all these great things together. But here I am stuck with you, Mom, who makes me do my homework and clean my room. And all of these troubles are placed upon the parent that remains to take care of the child. And it's an interesting way the mind works, that you would idealize the person that abandoned you while blaming and building hate for the person that's actually making sure you can survive and have a good life.
And that just increases the burden on the parent who is left behind. Okay?
Yet, as they run errands together on this special day, Chick sees his mother from a new perspective.
And that's really a great opportunity because there's often a side of our parents we don't see at all. They have to act like they're all-powerful, they're in control, they're the authority, but they have their own struggles as well.
Yeah, my mom raised my brothers and sisters, raised the 4 of us by herself. My dad and mom divorced when I was really young. I was an infant. And I grew up with them not knowing them together. But it was, as an adult, now I look at my mom and the difficulty she had at that period. And
everything
I have a
was
whole
on
new
her.
That's right.
Yeah.
And as a kid, it's just normal. But now looking at it as an adult, it's like, man, my mom had some trouble sometimes.
It's good to grow up and think about things.
I agree. Our next sentence. He discovers his father left them because he was having an affair with another woman.
Which does not explain the whole story. Why did he have the affair? They were probably not getting along.
So when you have an affair, it means to cheat on your wife or husband.
Take another lover.
Our next sentence, Chick comes to appreciate the many sacrifices that his mother made for him.
So now he realizes, well, she did not have an easy time. It wasn't necessarily mainly her fault. You can't say it's all one person's fault when people split up, but she probably did her best.
That adult perspective is a wonderful thing. He also begins to forgive himself for all of the mistakes he's made in his own life.
That's something we all have to do. You have to let things go. We all do stupid things, and we often dwell on them because they're so easy to remember. We have to move on.
Yeah, I remember a bunch of dumb things I did, and I don't have a problem forgiving myself. I have a problem forgetting them.
We can't.
And you think about them in the middle of the night.
But just don't obsess. We just have to let them go.
Our next sentence is, at the end of the day, Chick becomes conscious again and manages to survive his suicide attempt.
I don't want to think about how that happened. If he really did survive jumping from a high place, he would have so many broken bones and damaged organs. But in any case, he survived.
Now, at the end of the day means in conclusion, but we are also literally talking about the day he spent with his mother. Remember, he wakes up in a baseball field and mom says, spend one more day with me.
That's
and they
right.
learn about each other. So I thought this was an interesting play on words, but it did confuse me initially when I read that. I said, which one did the author intend? And
Exactly.
I get the feeling it means both.
That's right. Because when we say, well, at the end of the day, you have to quit your job. It's a conclusion. So in conclusion, that's one meaning. That's the idiomatic meaning. But here, he literally has only one day with his mother. And that's really the main one here. And so he becomes conscious again. He's awakened and he's survived.
Even though Chick dies of a stroke 5 years after this incident, he uses his final years to coach children's sports and reconnect with his family.
So as we mentioned earlier in the program, often a brush with death, so a near-death experience, it often tells you the value of life. And when you come back, you will probably do your best to live a better life and connect with people. They all say the one thing that matters is love.
I think some people would criticize Chick here because he waited his whole life to do the right thing. And you spent all these years isolating your ex-wife and your daughter, your family, and now you survive your suicide attempt. Now you want to do the right thing. I don't know. I think it's good. Some people would criticize that. I think it's quite wonderful that he did, in the end, make an attempt to fix the mistakes that he did end up perpetrating on others.
Better late than never, we could say. It sounds kind of trite, T-R-I-T-E. Trite, that means kind of corny. That's another word, C-O-R-N-Y. That means something we always say that doesn't have much meaning. But what often happens is these people are very, very sick. They're traumatized. They had a terrible experience. They don't really know how to behave better.
Now, tomorrow we'll see this phrase, to tug at your heartstrings. And I just wanted to take an opportunity to kind of introduce what it meant. When we tug at someone's heartstrings, we mean we kind of play on someone's emotions, maybe try to make them sad. And although we say this we just say this as a regular phrase today.
And it's kind of negative.
It actually had a medical basis a number of years ago. There are veins, of course, all throughout your body, and the heartstring was a vein that connected to your heart. And people used to think that if you said something sad, you would activate this nerve and it would make your heart feel away and therefore you were sad. Now, the only way we say heartstring anymore today, this idea of this string as a nerve, is in the back of your leg, your hamstring.
Oh, okay. I had no idea it was a real body part. Usually if it tugs at your heartstrings, it'll kind of make you cry and you'll feel embarrassed. That's all we have time for today, but there's a lot more to go in this story tomorrow. Make sure you tune in then. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.